Welcome to today's episode of Falling to Freedom, where addiction ends and faith begins, the weekly podcast that brings thoughtful, informed, and challenging discussions about addiction to the forefront of everyone's minds. We join our host now, Chad LaComb, for today's topic.
Well, today we are going to be stepping into a topic that is probably never more important with the things that are going on. It's tragic, but it needs to be talked about. It's tearing through not only individual lives, it's tearing through homes and our community. And that is overdose, drug poisoning, and the rise of fentanyl. You know, this problem is huge, and finally it seems like our administration is recognizing that. You know, for a long time, it was the elephant in the room that people didn't want to seem to address or to talk about. It seems like our administration right now is actually taking steps, whether it's, you know, President Trump really putting on a lot of pressure to people bringing fentanyl or the precursors into this country, Robert Kennedy at HHS really being proactive in providing services and putting resources toward addressing this. Even at the Attorney General's office, Pam Bondi, with trying to, you know, really bring consequences for people that are involved in this. And so it's a huge problem. And just some of the numbers I think that we were able to, you know, put together highlight how big of a problem this is. So in the last 20 years, literally from 2020 to 2022, so maybe not exactly the last 20 years, but roughly the last 20 years, drug overdose deaths went from 8.2 in every 100,000 people to 32.6 for every 100,000 people. That's a fourfold increase in deaths from overdoses. And you know, the question is, well, what changed in that 20 years? The main driver is fentanyl. So fentanyl really came on the scene 2010, somewhere around there. You know, it's a synthetic opioid. So when we're talking about opioids, we're talking about heroin, morphine. We're talking about things that are derived from the opium poppy, which is a plant. So a natural substance. Now fentanyl and its, you know, derivatives, which I think started with the name China White, are synthetic opioids. So these are man-made opioids that in 2010, fentanyl was a pretty small player on the scene of addiction and deaths, just 14%, about 3,000 deaths. But in 2017, it was claiming about 60% of the lives from those deaths. So a huge problem. And, you know, these aren't just numbers. These aren't just cold numbers that we're throwing out there. These are actual people's lives, which I know you're going to share with us. But another study from UCLA just last month, March 2025, found that in 2022, about 22 high schoolers ages 14 to 18 died every single week from overdoses. That's a lot. 22 high schoolers a week. That's 1,100 teens lost to fentanyl, whether it was an overdose or whether it was another drug that was laced with fentanyl and they didn't know what they were taking and ended up killing them. So this is a huge problem, and today I'm joined by Karen Streeter, a mom who knows the pain of this loss firsthand, unfortunately. She lost her son Kai to this monster, and we're grateful that she's here with us today to share her story with us and with you, our listeners, and I know her heart is that this would hopefully help somebody going through a similar thing. And that's our hope as well as we talk about this. So, Karen, I was hoping that you could maybe just start by telling us a little bit about Kai, your son, before any of the addiction started, because, this is not a problem that is for any specific demographic or socioeconomic group. It can happen to anyone. And I think your son's story really highlights that. So,
well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I feel very blessed to be able to share that part of my kiddo's story, because he really, really was a firecracker. So Kai, he was giggly. He was hilarious. I mean, that was all the way through. Very, very bright. He loved reading. He fancied himself a writer. He wrote all the time. He was very athletic. He was a competitive gymnast, pretty high level by the age of 10. He did, competitive mountain biking, skiing, a total daredevil. He was involved in parkour.
Parkour, that's where you're jumping off of concrete benches
climbing
and doing
buildings
flips
and jumping off of benches and all of it. Yeah, he loved any adrenaline, right? He also was very faithful. There's a picture that keeps popping up of his first communion that he had in the Catholic Church when he was in 2nd grade, and he was so proud of it. When he was in 7th grade, 8th grade actually. When he was in early 8th grade, he was like a house leader, so for our school, and so it's like a peer mentor kind of program, and involved in our Christian charity organization, and just really loved God, and what else? He would light up a room.
Good in school.
Great in school. Yeah, great in school. Never had to worry about him getting his homework done. He was always curious, really motivated to get good grades. He was on Honor Society in junior high. And then
where did he grow up?
He grew up in Salt Lake City until he was in 7th grade.
Okay.
And then we moved to Boston in 7th grade, so he went to 7th, 8th, and 9th grade in Boston. And then we were relocated here. And that's where everything started. So
here being Southern California.
Right. Sorry. In 9th grade, he started vaping. We don't know. Something in 8th grade happened. Like he had a personality switch.
This was in Boston, though,
This was in Boston, yeah. And just near the end of his 8th grade year, something just kind of turned him around. And he just started distancing himself from the family and being more emotional. But at that same time, it's like
puberty, maybe?
Puberty, right. Middle school, puberty. I mean, it was like, okay, let's just keep an eye on him, let him have his space, that kind of thing. But that's when we saw a real change in him. And then in 9th grade, we caught him vaping. And then, which that too was not really surprising, because the particular high school he had been at was actually being featured on CNN for the vape epidemic at that time.
Really?
Yeah. So I guess it was something like 96% of the students there had admitted to vaping right at that time. And so it was when it was really blowing up and becoming available to kids. So he got involved with that. And then that's where around that time I also caught him smoking marijuana and getting high. And then...
When you say getting high with marijuana. Specifically marijuana.
Right, yeah.
Right? This was 9th grade?
9th grade, yeah.
In Boston.
In Boston, yeah. So then we were moving to this area, San Diego area. So it was like, hey, great, fresh start. He was not excited about it, but he also wasn't opposed to it. So we were like, all right, well, maybe we can change things, get things turned around, find a therapist, that kind of thing. But then he, the first couple of weeks of high school, jumped right in and started vaping and got himself in trouble.
Found the people that were doing those things that he was doing before.
Right. He told me, because we've talked a lot in his, sober moments and things, he has told me in the past that they were the easy people to get to know because there was always a commodity. And he felt shy and didn't have an easy time connecting at that age.
Teenage years are awkward for a young boy. I mean, obviously I can tell you from personal experience, it's like when you hit that age, is a very awkward time. So it seems to be a common trend in, you know, young men that go down that path around that time. You know, junior highs is critical.
Right.
7th, 8th, 9th grade is a critical time in a young man's life.
Yeah.
Right. And your family life, I mean, not to pry and be too personal, but you and your husband?
It's me and my husband, and then we have another son, Rowan, who's younger.
Normal household?
Oh, yeah. I mean...
Not beating your children and locking them in the basement or anything like
anymore,
that, right?
No,
right?
Never did that. We, you know, always tried to give them the opportunities. Maybe too often. Maybe that's the thing. I don't know. But no, we had a very normal, boring life on paper, you know.
Yeah. I say that because, you know, sometimes people might think that this only happens to people, you know, where there's trauma or something horrible happened and they're using to deal with that, which is the case sometimes.
Right.
It is definitely the response for some people.
Well, and we dug into
everyone.
that. We dug into that, like what happened, what could have happened. Let's look at all the angles and see if we can find a point. And also, like I said, we got therapy involved. And then again, he told me a couple years ago, he was just like, no, nothing really, I can't pinpoint anything that really made me switch. So, you know, straight from him. But yeah, the fact that he was a Catholic school kid. I taught at his school. You know, I mean, I knew where he was. I knew his friends.
Right.
You know, we were very hands-on.
Yeah.
So
he was under the watchful eye of mom there as well.
And he hated it, but yes.
And still found a way.
Right.
So take us through like that progression. I think it's helpful. Especially for people that may be kind of dealing with this at the initial stages and they're finding out their kid's smoking. Right? It's like we discussed. That seems to be a precursor to these things. What was Kai's progression to the point where he was doing fentanyl? I mean, there's a big gap between those two. So how do you go from one to the other? If you could walk us through that.
When we were finally, more established here in California, and he got himself in trouble, he continued to get in trouble at school, and he started sneaking out. Being brought home by the cops. And, my husband and I were just like, who is this kid? This is not our lives. This is not how we've raised him. And it didn't seem like any consequence it didn't matter. The biggest thing was taking his phone away. But that caused so much just rage and anger in the house that, his argument was, how am I supposed to make friends if I don't have my phone? And just things like that. But he was not in a normal headspace. He would just be off his rocker, raging, or run out of the house, and we wouldn't know where he was. I mean, the amount of times that we called the police, non-emergency line, just going, look, our kid, we don't know what's going on. He doesn't seem stable. Would you go track him down? And we got very friendly with the police because of that kind of thing during those years. At one point, he was up for expulsion, which, again, blew my mind. From school, yeah. And at the expulsion hearing, things happened, and basically, he got up there and talked, and they said, okay, we're going to give you a second chance so that it stays off your record, except that you have to complete a drug program. And so here's where I would like to change things someday. The school, although they mandated that, I said, okay, well, where do we go? We're new to California. And then the severity, like what kind of drug program is out there, I certainly don't know. And they really couldn't tell me. They said, well, there are some online ones.
So basically, they made it a condition for him to come back to school, but had no suggestions or resources to offer you.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, names were thrown out there of different places, and then, oh, well, you can find some online. It's like, oh, wouldn't you want a particular one, And then, there was an outpatient place close to us, so I thought, well, it's summertime. That's where he's going to spend his summer then. we'll take him in the day and pick him up at night. We'll go to the family days. And we did.
And how, just for kind of the timeline, what grade is he at this point? How old is he?
He was just finished his sophomore year of high school.
Okay, so he's 16?
He's about going on 16, yeah.
Going on 16, and what is he using at this point?
At this point, we only knew that he was smoking weed, wax, and Juul. It's like very heavy, concentrated marijuana.
Oh, okay.
It's like a tar.
THC inside the wax. And
right.
Okay.
I'm probably slaughtering it, and someone's laughing at me somewhere about that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, my days of doing those things are way in the past. These are all kind of new as well. But
yeah, that would, he'd be passed out next to the pool outside in the morning at 5 a.m. Things like that where I'm like, this is not okay. And actually, at that point, he wasn't that heavily into it. It was still more just marijuana and vaping, at least that we knew about. I probably could be corrected on that by someone, but so we decided to go the outpatient route, and we were at a facility that had both youth and adults in the program, and I didn't see anything wrong with that. Looking back on that now, I wonder if that was a bad idea. I think that's something I would caution parents to really look into. Because as he started getting his weekly drug tests, more and more things were found in his system instead of less and less. And so eventually they found meth in his system, and he didn't graduate the program.
Like he's meeting other people there that are introducing him to other things. Right.
And we come to find out that, court mandated cases are sent there, but we didn't know that at the time, nor did we know to ask that at the time as parents. We thought we were doing the right thing, but he definitely found a way to learn hard drugs.
So that was the point when you think he went from just smoking pot to...
That's the point where he started calling himself an addict at that age. And that was when he got into really starting to believe in the 12-step program, which the first step is you are powerless. I wonder at that age, when you're 15, is that something to tell somebody that you're powerless over this thing and you're never going to change? It's going to be with you all of your life. I can see that at a point that would be very helpful, and it is very helpful for a lot of people. And I'm not knocking that. I just wonder with youth, I don't know if that's the right
message
approach.
You want to implant in their head.
Yeah. So he definitely started believing that and calling himself an addict at 15, 16. And then I guess at that time we were like, well, no, you're not. No, you're not. But maybe it really had a hold of him at that point. So, I mean, it obviously did. So
then just keep, sharing that progression. So at this point, he's going to these meetings, and he's now gone from marijuana to meth. Okay. And then that lasts for how long?
A while. I'm trying to think about how we got him into an alternative school, which meant he was home part of the day and at class part of one day a week. And
like independent study?
Independent study kind of thing, which was a little tricky because this is a kid who's dropping out of life. But we couldn't have him in the high school either because, he told me it's like a candy store. He knows what to get where. And so we're like, oh, well, if you feel that way, we're not going to send you there. So he did this program half-heartedly. So all those academic goals that he had for so long were just gone. He didn't really care. I think a part of him did care. I mean, he did end up graduating high school eventually, but it was, wasn't as motivated as, of course, we were. But
were there periods of sobriety in this time?
In that time, I would say he was sober from the harder drugs. He always went back to smoking marijuana. And there was a time where we were like, fine, if that's all that's in your system, because we started testing him at home once a week. If that's all that's in your system, okay, we're going to we'll work with you. We'll, compromise, see what we can do. But then more often than not, he would just start popping, meth again or cocaine. So during those years, he started doing that. And then we knew he was getting into pills. So I'm trying to think of the name, but
opioids, Oxycontin.
Yeah, Oxy. He was getting into that, and that is my guess is that's where he found fentanyl. Is he was probably,
and this was how old?
Probably 17.
17 years old, and he started using opioids.
It could have been before that, when us not know, of course, but
sure.
And then let's see, there was then COVID. The lockdowns happened, and that made everything much more difficult because we're all at home together. He was able to hit his app on Snapchat and get whatever he wanted delivered to the house. And it was unbelievable. Snapchat also would not allow parental controls. Like it scrambles it. So you can have a parent app, and I had those apps. We were very diligent about those since they had phones, both my boys. And we learned that, okay, I'm looking at Snapchat conversations, and some of them are from 5 months ago, and some are from recently, and some just have little emojis. And the little emojis were when he was able to get whatever he wanted.
You found this out afterwards?
Yeah, it took me a little while. Yep. And I don't know that anyone really knew. I knew that Snapchat scrambled it, and I did ask the app tech people, I'm like, why is this not working on there? And they said, no, they're not allowed to do anything about that because it's supposed to be an 18 and up service, but anyone can get on it. So I know that right now there's a lawsuit against Snapchat from parents in this area that looks pretty promising. So yeah, after that, during COVID, he really started acting just very manic. And manic in the way of violent, completely violent, or sobbing on the floor saying he didn't want to live. There was one day where I was teaching online because I'm a teacher, and I was in my bedroom and I had the camera up and I'm trying to teach. And I had taken his phone because we knew he was using. And he starts banging on the door and screaming. And finally I got him to quiet down. And then he started writing, I need my phone. You're killing me. Like that kind of thing. And I'm like, and you could see in his eyes, he wasn't sober. He had already gotten, more skeletal, kind of losing muscle mass and, the cute chubby cheeks that he had. And that was the day that after all these horrible things happened, he ran out of the house, and my husband went down to get him, and I called 911, and they came, and the police 5150'd him, so on a mandatory hold, where he was sent to the hospital and then transported to the nearest closest
Just so the
bed.
listeners know, that's
yes.
a term for when the police hold someone for medical or psychiatric reasons, right? Maybe they're a danger to themselves and to the community, and so 5150 is like the code.
The code for it, yeah.
Code for it, okay.
And it's usually, I think it's a 72-hour hold, so... So he gets shipped off, like an hour and a half away somewhere in LA to some psych ward. And there he just basically traded one drug for another because, yes, he was dried up of what he had been on, but then they're feeding him meds. And the system is not perfect. I know this, and I know that the system is very overrun. They're very overburdened. But I know for a fact that it was easy for him to get extra. And so when we picked him up...
Now, what were they... Was it like methadone? Was it like for the opioid addiction? Or was it just psychotropic drugs?
No, I think it was... No, I don't think it was for the addiction. I think it was just to settle him down, to keep him calm. And I can't remember what it was. But yeah, so he started loving that. We picked him up and we took him home. And we took home a crazy person. He jumped out of the car. He ran off. And like, okay, well, that... was a waste of time, and how do we have this child back in our house? And at the same time, you're feeling all of the emotions because it's your child, they're underage. And people during all of that time would be like, oh, well, you just have to show them some tough love. Like, would you tell me what that is? Because we have done everything we can think of and nothing is working. I can't lock them out of the house. When they're 18, a lot of parents say, go ahead and change the locks. He's not 18, and there are laws, That started a long haul of different things, and Within that time period, he started using needles, and so he got into heroin.
How old was he at that point?
Probably 17, 18.
Yeah.
And started finding foil all over the house, which, you know, he would smoke blues on, which again, go back to the fentanyl there. And yeah, now we have a fear of foil because it's just so triggering. And again, during that time, he OD'd in our house twice. And within that time, there were a couple of residential treatments that he went to. Sorry.
Hold on, you just said he OD'd in your house twice.
Well, all said and done, he OD'd in our house 4 times. 3 times we were able to revive him.
So he died.
He died.
4 times in your house.
Yes.
And you revived him, or the EMT, or?
My husband the first 2 times, me the 3rd time, with the help of Narcan, of course, every time. And then I found him when he died and tried to revive him. So, yeah.
How long ago was that?
He died June 6th, 2024, so almost 9 months. It'll be 9 months next week.
Well, you're very brave for being here and talking about this with it being so fresh. It's
important. I want to keep his voice alive. I want his presence still felt because his story can't end there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of people, I think, that are either experiencing what you went through and need to hear this, or, God forbid, you know, the outcome is the same and need some encouragement. You know, I hate to, you know, dig in a little deeper, but from what I understand, there was a period of sobriety before this last overdose when he passed away.
All said and done, oh, thank you. He went through 9 rehabs, as far as I could count, sometimes multiple times at the same ones, and was in several sober livings where he got a lot of support and a lot of love, really learned to grow up, see beyond himself, and start serving. And the last rehab that he was in, he really took it seriously. And he wanted to come home to be at the house because it was always conditional. It's like, if you're using, you can't come home. If you're working on yourself, of course, your house is our house. We're your family. But he wanted to come home for his little brother's high school graduation. That was his goal. And he did it. And then from there, he was sober for about 1 year and 3 months or so.
And this was, what, 20 years old?
20, yeah, just about 20. And he got really into service with Narcotics Anonymous and found a really great group of people that definitely loved him. And I know he loved them back. Unfortunately, we didn't really get to know any of them until afterwards, but we're grateful that we know them now. And we were able to see the love that he did give. And while he was in that sober time, he started climbing again, went to the climbing gym with some friends, and stayed very loyal to NA, like I said. He worked with kids with autism, and I think that's what really got him moving forward. It wasn't the greatest job because of money, right? But
probably got his eyes off himself,
yes,
onto others that had needs.
And he actually did say that. He was like, it's time for me to give back. And I'm looking at these kids who, you know, by no fault of their own, they're acting in ways that they need help with. And I've been there and I want to help with that. And I know one of the families that he worked with, I'm still in touch with them. And yeah, he made a really, really big impression with the families and the children that he worked with. And then eventually he got a job at Lowe's, and he was so proud to go, and like really, really proud of selling grills and lawnmowers. And I was one of those moms that I went in just to kind of spy on how he was doing, you know. And then he also got himself into electrical school. And so he was studying to be an electrician, and he loved it and was so proud of himself. Yeah, and so we had many glimpses of who he really is.
And he was living in your house at that time?
Yeah, he lived with us. I mean, those were really happy times, you know, and we had a lot of really good conversations about his drug use, the past, our family, like, hey, what could we have done differently? And he said to me multiple times, there is nothing you could have done differently. It's like, I did this. I don't know why I did this, but there is nothing that you guys could have done differently. And that's been reassuring, with this outcome. So,
any idea why, with everything looking positive, he went back to that?
I don't know why. I have a feeling some people might know why, and I don't want to know, because that would just be back to the darkness, and we had gotten so much light back. But yeah, he did. He started using again, and we knew it, and all the trauma comes right back. And the good thing was he came to his senses pretty quickly, in a way. Normally in those situations, it's like, okay, pick a rehab or get out. This time around, because he had so much going for him, he was like, I can do this. I can clean up. I'm gonna taper off. I'm gonna do whatever. Which we were like, but we had seen so much progress and so much maturity, and
you were hopeful.
We were very hopeful, and he was hopeful. He kept going to school. He kept going to work. He didn't miss his shifts, so as far as I know. And so we were all very hopeful. So it was a shock in a way, but at the same time, we had gone through this so many times before that to find him again, unfortunately, was not a shock. And that's a horrible thing to say.
You found him?
Yeah. Yeah.
Woke up the next morning and...
Yeah, I get up at 5 to get ready for work, and I always go in his room and peek in and make sure he's okay. And he was not. So, yeah. So then you just go through what you have to go through. Narcan and 911, and my husband was out of town, so my younger son came in and helped, which I hate because he's seen it. He's seen it 4 or 3 times now. And yeah, that you can't erase that.
It's devastating. Now, it's still very fresh, right? This just happened 10 months ago. I'm sure you've had time to think about things. You've been going through this for, prior to the overdose, 6 years with him, and just dealing with this. There's going to be no doubt people that are listening to this podcast that are going through that exact same thing at various stages. Maybe their son or daughter is smoking, and they're like, is that going to be their end?
Right.
Or maybe they're already full-blown into a heroin or fentanyl addiction. And, I would just be curious if there's anything that you would want to share with people, things that maybe you might have done differently, or advice that you would give to people so their outcome doesn't have to be the same.
We went through so many layers of it. So when he was younger and underage, I think that was the hardest, most trying part, because we could not find resources to help us. We couldn't find people who knew of resources to help us in that age. And even the residential places were not that knowledgeable, and they didn't have a component for the family. So I would say, first and foremost, if that's the position that you're in.
What do you mean by a component for the family?
When he was at different facilities, there would be a night where he could make a phone call home or something. But there was nothing. I think that things could have been a little bit different if they had more of a family night, like a family therapy session for the family all together. And some places did have that down the line. And then again, we were in the COVID years. So I think a lot of programs were cut, or they couldn't do them anymore because you couldn't be in person. So maybe they do exist and we just missed that. I do think COVID helped us miss a lot of things with this situation. I tried to get him into community service, and he was mandated community service from the school as well. But certain places won't take the kids that are mandated, of course, because they don't want the troublemakers. But then where do you find a way to give, to teach them to give back? So something like that is something I'd like to address at some point, in the future, for communities. Or, maybe I just need to do more research, because now it's 6 years later, so there might be more things that actually exist that I don't know about.
One thing that I've seen change, over the last 20 years is, at least from the community, cities or counties, less consequences for drug addiction and using and the things that come with it. Right? It doesn't sound like Kai ever went to jail, juvenile hall, anything like that.
No.
But there was a time when people would go to juvenile hall or jail for doing these things. And I don't know that that's not necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes those are things that can actually shake a person and wake them up, right? And it seems to be, maybe it'll change back, but more of a consequence for doing these things. So I don't know. I just, it just seems like it's changed a lot. And sometimes those things can help a person realize, or make that decision in the right direction.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. But community service, it just made me think of it, because a lot of times community service is attached to the consequences, right? You're, at least initially, it's not like they just throw you in jail first time. It's like first time they try and do like some low level thing like community service, and they would assign you to something.
Right. And that would have, I think that would have helped change things. I don't know for a fact, but it was just difficult to find places that would allow him to do it. And then also my husband and I both work, so allow him to do it without a parent there, that was almost impossible. But that would be something, if I were to give advice, like find a way to make that happen, or maybe someone needs to come up with a way to make that happen for those kids. Maybe that could be a school program, or, if this kid has done X, Y, and Z, then here we've got these ideas.
Do you think in hindsight, maybe it was detrimental moving to Boston? Not that there's anything wrong with Boston, but
I don't think
moving.
It was Boston. I think this move might have been more detrimental. So the San Diego one, and maybe it's because it was two moves close together. It was what it was. But yeah, we think of that often. And
I'm just thinking, that at that age, it's, we talked about puberty and just a lot of things that are going on in a young man's life. Probably stability is an important thing at that point. But I mean, just, talking out loud, just trying to think through these things. Anything else that?
I think that the best piece of advice that we ever took to heart, which was the most effective for everyone, for the family, for my husband and I's marriage, and for Kai, was setting boundaries and sticking to the boundaries. And that is not easy to do. It's honestly the hardest way of loving a human being ever. Here's what my expectation is. If you don't meet it, you're out. I mean, if
maybe
you're
that's
using
what's
in my
meant by
house,
tough love.
You got to get out. Exactly. But then if they're saying that to me when he's 15,
right.
It's a little different.
Sure.
But when he was 18, it was almost a sigh of relief, because we were like, now we do have natural consequences. Not that we want to have to implement them, but yeah, we could change the locks if we had to. It was not easy. It was easy to say, if you're using, you have to leave. And that we stuck by many, many times, which caused him to be homeless. And as a mom and a father, that's devastating. But we knew in our heart of hearts that had to be the way of it if we were going to stick together as a family. Yeah. And that honestly is the thing that gave us sanity. I mean, it was like, okay, he made this choice knowingly, even though it was the addict brain. He made this choice knowingly, and he's got to go. And yeah, it could be rehab, or we'll help you in any way we can, but you can't be here. And so sometimes he would choose just to take off. Other times, more often than not, he chose rehab. That's the biggest thing. And then just being compassionate. I mean, just seeing your child for who they actually are, not who the addict is. Knowing that he's a child of God who's feeling worthless. Keeping that in mind is so very important, because it's so easy to be angry and just say why, or just stop it, or knock it off, or how could you hurt me this way? it's not about us, you know. And finding that compassion took a long, long time.
I'll bet.
So,
what would you say to someone that is in your situation? Someone that, you know, has suffered this unspeakable loss, you know? I mean, how are you dealing with this, and what, you know, words of encouragement would you offer to someone else that's dealing with it?
Excuse me. I think that I would have to say my faith, absolutely, probably number one. Not even probably. It is number one, because I could have gotten very bitter. I could have been very angry at God. I could have lost my faith completely. And instead, I just started praying incessantly. You know, the minute that it happened, it became prayer. And if it weren't for that, I don't know that I'd be able to get up in the morning and go to work. I've leaned on our family. We've got an incredible family from, you know, all over the country, and everyone came in, family and, you know, friend family also. And that's been helpful, and not being afraid to reach out when I'm having a low point, which is really hard for me because I'm a very positive person. And so, yeah, making sure I'm reaching out. And then another thing is self-care. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it would be so easy just to lay in bed and not do anything. But forcing myself to get up every day, actually do something that's good for me, make sure I'm eating clean. And what grief does to the body and trauma does to the body is just despicable. It's just mysterious and awful. The stress levels, the nightmares, all of those things that happen. And for me, it helps when I am like taking care of myself better, which I guess goes hand in hand, you know. But it's hard to remember that when your brain is constantly unconscious or subconscious kind of thing. It's always there. I'm always thinking of him. I'm always wondering. I'm always missing him. I'm always what-ifing. I'm always talking to him. That's the other thing that helps a lot. I talk to him all the time. I write a letter to him once a week. So
you write a letter to him once a week?
I have a journal. So I used to, many mornings for years, I had just cute little stationery that had jokes or whatever on it. And especially in his lowest points, I would just write him a letter in the morning before I went to work. And he has a bunch of them still saved, which, you know, was very nice for me to find. But yeah, so that actually helps a lot when I have to just, me and him, we sit and journal. So.
Well, you shared with me that I don't know if it was the day or the next day, you found a journal that Kai had been keeping, and you wanted to read a few of the things that he wrote.
Yeah.
So we would love to have you share that with us if you're willing.
Yeah. So I'm really happy I found this. Actually, my sister-in-law was helping clean out and organize the room. We'd clean out, meaning organizing. We haven't gotten rid of anything, you know. Yeah. But he has lots of journals, and this one, I think she must have read through a little bit, maybe, which is fine. But she put it on his desk in a different place, and I didn't happen upon it until a little bit later, and like not long. But this is a journal of his sober year, and it is
the year leading up to the overdose.
Mm-hmm, yeah, okay. And just the hopefulness and the. I was worried that he no longer was as faithful as he used to be, because everyone goes, you know, in different stages. And this journal proves it completely wrong, or that he was completely faithful. So, you know, I've learned somewhat recently that my God really is, and I'm learning to trust him. I'm definitely fearful, but I have to do things differently. Gratitude lists, grateful to be alive. There is one in here, I won't sit and look for it too hard, but he talks about being at a meeting sitting next to a father who just lost his son, and how he did not want to do that to his family. And he wanted to change things and do things differently, because how could he ever hurt his family that way? Mm-hmm. And that, believe it or not, made me feel good, because it would be easy to blame him and be angry with him right now. And I can't be. I have nothing but love and forgiveness, and hoping he forgives me for whatever, you know. It's a different relationship now. And just because he's no longer here doesn't mean that ends. It's definitely just changed. But one thing that I love, that I'm sure he got so much of this from the program and from his faith and from all of the people who supported him, and probably us too. But he was hopeful, writing about being hopeful to start school as an electrician. I feel like everything is going to work out again because I'm finally God-centered again. I feel like I'm genuinely moving forward again finally, even if I'm not going as fast as I like or as fast as I think I want to. God sets my pace today. And that just, I'm crying, but it brings me so much hope, and just a lot of peace, because I know that he didn't want that. He didn't want the ending that he got. Mm-hmm. And I just really pray that I can find a way to keep sharing his story and help somebody down the line, parents, families, other addicts. That's what I want.
It's very courageous to, expose your pain like that. And Kai certainly was an amazing young man, mm-hmm. obviously loved greatly by his family, greatly missed, and we're just very thankful that you would come and share. And our desire is that, many people out there that might be dealing with a similar situation, no matter what stage, that they would listen, be encouraged, and hopefully, have a different outcome for sure. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Karen, so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for letting me share my story.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being a part of this much-needed conversation as we expose the raw truths about addiction. Don't forget to like, follow, and most importantly, share. Remember, addiction is the dirty little secret that every family deals with, but nobody wants to talk about.